Have you ever looked at your brand and something just felt incredibly off? This was my story a few years ago, and I went through the process of determining that I needed a brand refresh. There can be a lot of different reasons why your brand might need a refresh. Your brand will always be evolving, always small tweaks, adjustments that are going to be made. But if you get to a point where you look at your brand, you look at your content, and you're just like, this doesn't feel true to me anymore, I wanted to share with you exactly what I did to pinpoint what needed to happen and how I ultimately needed to refresh my brand.
This is the Authentic Brand Builders Podcast with Michelle Knight.
Welcome back, Authentic Brand Builder, to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited that you are here. We're continuing our conversation all about branding. Last week, I shared with you some awesome ways to use AI and specifically ChatGPT to speed up the branding process. Now, while that episode was primarily for new entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs just getting started with their branding process, I received quite a few emails from people asking if my program You Branded was for them. And these questions were all about where they were at in their business, saying that they had already gone through the branding process, but something feels off, their messaging isn't quite right. Could You Branded ultimately help them? So I thought, let's make an episode about it. Let's talk about what signs might be happening that indicate you need to go through a brand refresh. Not a complete rebrand, because nobody has time for that, but a brand refresh to make sure that your current brand beautifully and authentically reflects where you are today and where you are going. So I created an entire checklist that I'm going to walk you through. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the signs that it might be time for a brand refresh. Now, I already hinted at one of them in the introduction, but ultimately, if you look at your brand and you just feel absolutely disconnected from it. And this can happen time and time again. And I'm not talking about small little tweaks. I'm really just like looking at your brand and saying, this doesn't feel like me. This doesn't showcase me. I feel like I've graduated from this level. That in and of itself can be a big sign that it is time for you to go through this checklist and go through the branding process so that you can have a brand refresh. But some of us don't look at our brand and feel that way, but things just still don't feel quite right. So here are some very specific points that you might need to pinpoint in order to determine if it's time to go back into the branding process. Number one, your customer has changed. Now, this could be because you have learned a lot about your customer since when you first went through the branding process. You've sold products, you've sold services, you've had calls, you've gotten feedback from your community, you've engaged with people in the DMs. And so you know so much more about your ideal customer that it's almost way more specific than it used to be. And that can lead to some changes and some shifts in obviously your messaging and your brand emotions and your offers. So that's one way your customer might have changed. And then the other is obviously a very like in your face that you no longer serve the same customer anymore. So maybe you started off helping new moms and now you specifically specialize in helping stepmoms, right? Or maybe you started off helping new entrepreneurs and now you are helping entrepreneurs with six-figure businesses. The messaging and all of those things are going to change because the customer has changed. So number one, your customer has changed. Number two, your visuals don't align. And now branding isn't always about the visuals, but again, if you feel like you have graduated in a sense, this can be an indication that so much of your brand has shifted as well. So I had a client come to me last year and he was like, listen, when I started my brand, like this made perfect sense. I was in kindergarten, right? I was just getting started. But now I graduated and I'm at the college level and my brand still looks like a kindergartner's brand. And so because his brand had evolved over time, small tweaks with his customer, small tweaks with his messaging, his offers, all of these different things, the overall vibe and the feel and the aesthetics of his brand changed as well. And it was time for a refresh of those pieces. Now, as you'll see when we go into the checklist, you can't just go and just pick a bunch of new colors and fonts. You need to make sure all of the branding pieces are solidified and you're clear on those so you can pick the right new updates for your current audience and your current position. Okay, the next one, and perhaps my favorite one because it's all about brand messaging, but ultimately your brand messaging feels inconsistent and maybe even difficult. And I'll talk about this, maybe I'll tie these two together, but content creation feels hard. This can be a big old neon sign in your face that something is off with your brand foundations, because coming up with content ideas shouldn't be difficult. Writing messages should not be difficult if you're crystal clear on those fundamental pieces. And here at Brand Mary, I teach core brand messages, which are like umbrella messages for your brand, and that really helps with the consistency. But if you feel like you're one person here and one person here, and you show up on social media and then someone goes to your website and it's completely different, the messaging is not consistent, the messaging is off, and that is a clear indicator that it is time for a refresh. And then the final one, and this isn't so much like the first one where we talked about like looking at your brand and just feeling like it doesn't reflect you. This is you feel disconnected. You feel truly disconnected. Like you look at your brand and you're like, I don't even know who that is anymore because you have changed so much. Life happens around us all the time. Sometimes in our control, sometimes out of our control. And because we are entrepreneurs in today's day and age where we are creating the content and we are infusing our personality and our values and our mission and our story into everything that we create, when those changes happen on a personal level, sometimes the brand needs to keep up because you feel like it's not authentic and aligned anymore. And this was a huge indicator for me when I went through my brand refresh at the end of 2023. And then when I looked a little deeper, it was because my customer had changed. It was my messaging was unclear, all of those different things when I dove in, when I went through this checklist, this audit I'm about to share with you. But if you're feeling like there's a big disconnect and you're not even wanting to really show up, that is the best time to go through this process and focus on a brand refresh. And again, I'm speaking from experience here. Because even as a brand strategist, even as someone who helps other people with this exact same process, we get really in the day-to-day of our business and the day-to-day of our lives that sometimes we don't have time to sit and go, this and this, because we're like, gotta create content, gotta do the admin work, gotta do all of these different things. And then we reach a point where we go, oh crap, like this doesn't feel good anymore. And so obviously I want us to avoid getting to that point in time, but sometimes we just do. And that is a fantastic time to go back through the branding process to create a brand that is authentically you. Okay, now let's get into the brand refresh audit checklist. So these were the exact things that I looked at with my existing brand to kind of determine that A, it was time for a brand refresh, and B, to give me an idea of what to prioritize and ultimately where to start. If you want a copy of this checklist so you can download it and don't have to go back and watch this video again, although love the views, you can go ahead and go to brandmary.com/checklist, and I have it all printed out for you there. All right, so the first category that we're going to focus on is brand clarity and strategy. Now, if you know anything about me at Brand Mary, hopefully you do, and if not, you're new, welcome. We take an inward to outward approach to branding, meaning I am not going to have you go look at other brands and see what inspires you before you first ask yourself, what is a priority to you? What is your story? What are your values? What is your mission? So whether you're at the beginning stages of the branding process and you need to do that work, or you're now in a position where you find that your brand doesn't feel aligned, you got to go back and do that work. So the first thing that I want you to do is to revisit your brand mission and your values and see if they still reflect where your brand is going. Because again, we can change, we can grow. Now, if you've never done this work before, that tells me that we absolutely need to get back into the branding process, because that's probably why most of our stuff is misaligned, because we didn't start with us at our core. Because again, you're the one showing up, you're the one creating the content, you're the one leading the offers. So you need to feel connected to your brand. So again, audit your brand message and your values. Are they still aligned with where you are and where you are ultimately going? Number 2, this piggybacks off what we talked about in the beginning, your ideal customer. Does your ideal customer align with where your brand is going? Okay, you're going to notice a lot of this is like, where are we going? We've been doing this for a long time. Got to breathe a little bit new life into it. Has your ideal customer changed? Who are they? What do they need from you? And really identify the pieces that have changed with your ideal customer. Maybe it's not a complete new customer, but maybe you got away from the specifics about who you serve. Because again, with all of the things going on, it can be really easy to lose the specifics of our ideal customer. So do a quick audit of your customer profile and make sure that all of that feels true to where you are today. And the third part in the brand clarity and strategy is all about your unique positioning. What makes you different? Are you clearly articulating what makes you different? And are you clear on that? Have you lost sight of that? Because that can be so easy as well. So what ultimately makes you separate from other people in your industry? What is unique to you? And this is where the storytelling work is so freaking important. Maybe you've lost sight of that. Maybe again, just the repetition of the things has forced you to lose sight of what makes you stand out and why someone would choose your brand over someone else's. And so ask yourself, is this clear? Am I clearly communicating this? If you aren't, why? Is it because you don't even know what that is? Okay, our second place to audit is going to be brand messaging and voice. And this is such a crucial part in obviously everything that we create, from our content, our copywriting, our aesthetics, all of it. So at this phase, we're going to look at your story, your messaging, and the overall vibe of your brand. So number one, does your current brand story reflect your evolution and where you currently are? And this was such an interesting aha moment for me when I was going through my brand refresh, is I realized that I had updated my website many times, but I had never rewritten my brand story, my About Me page. I had updated photos and like layout and colors and all of that over the last, 9 years or whatever, but I had never rewritten my story. And when I went in, I realized that so much of that was still true, but there was so much more to add. There were so many more connection points and things that would draw my audience in and show them that I absolutely get what they are going through, and also show them what's possible. Because when I first wrote that story, it was in 2016. I have done a lot as a business owner. I've achieved a lot as a business owner, and I've done a lot in my personal life since then. That's incredibly inspiring, like living in an RV for 2 years. So just looking at this and realizing, oh my gosh, we could absolutely update this and make this feel more aligned, was a really big aha moment for me and made me realize that I needed to go through the process again, because if that had changed, I'm sure so much other stuff had changed as well. Now, I mentioned before how important brand messaging is, and obviously here at Brand Mary, we have core brand messages, which are umbrella messages that match your brand as a whole. They're not about a specific service or a product. They're really what your brand stands for, how you support your ideal customer, and why it ultimately benefits them. This is something that I teach inside of my program, You Branded, and it's a fantastic exercise for every freaking entrepreneur. But I want you to go through and I want you to, let's say, look at the last 30 days of content, go through your website and just ask yourself, is this clear? Is this how I would message my brand today? Or are there small adjustments? And again, this one is like multi-loaded because it could indicate your customer is off. It could indicate that your products or your offers have changed. It could indicate that you now offer so much more than you did before. Your authority has expanded. And so that is a sure sign that you have got to go back to the brand foundation, specifically unique positioning, customer, and then ultimately being able to craft your brand messages. Because your brand messages are going to fuel everything that you create. So if content feels hard, if writing ads feels hard, if copywriting, email marketing feels hard, all of that, writing a sales page, it's probably because your brand messaging has evolved, but you haven't gone back to lay that solid foundation in which to continue scaling and building your house, aka your business. And then the last one here, because while branding is not aesthetics, as we talked about before, you want to feel good when you show up and share content and visuals and you post something on social media and you send people to your website, you make thumbnails, whatever you're doing in your business. So go look at your stuff. Look at your colors, look at your fonts, look at your photos, and ask yourself, do these reflect where I am today? When I went through my brand refresh at the end of 2023, I also did a brand photo shoot, which was so fun and honestly really elevated my whole refresh experience because I was using photos from my travels. When I had taken brand photos previously, they were really all outside, which is totally on brand for me. Some of them were in California, where I was traveling with my family at the time. They were all from my RV days. But then I went through a big identity shift and I bought a house and I homeschooled my son. And so much of my life had changed that I am very much in my space now, and I wanted my brand to show that. And so doing a photo shoot after I got clear on all these things and doing a photo shoot in my house, having that like laid back entrepreneur vibe that I am and have always had, it really helped me feel more aligned and connected to where my identity is today, which made me more excited to show up. Look at your current brand situation and ask yourself, does this reflect where I am today? And rather than going down a freaking rabbit hole or getting stuck in what other people are doing, because this is so easy to do if you are a seasoned entrepreneur and you're like, oh, I need a brand refresh. Oh, I like this person and I like this person. I like this person. And then suddenly we've lost sight of who we are and the whole point of doing this. The first thing I want you to do is figure out how you want people to feel when they come in contact with your brand. I want you to think about those things that really reflect where you are today. A Pinterest board is great for this. And then save yourself a buttload of time and go put that into ChatGPT. Put the image, put all the information that you have about your brand and your customer profile and your messaging and all of those things that you've done. Put it in there with a prompt and ask it to help you come up with 3 different options for fonts that work together, 3 different options for color profiles. Save yourself so much freaking time. This is something that I added into You Branded, which again is my signature branding course that takes you through the core foundations of branding. Unique positioning, your story, your ideal customer, your messaging, your offers, and finally your brand aesthetic. And when I tell you that I wish I had that 9 years ago to save me months in choosing fonts and colors, I hope you hear it in my voice because I can't even tell you how valuable that would have been to have that exact prompt. So again, it's an easy way to do it. If you're making these updates, you don't have to go down the rabbit hole of figuring out what those new elevated colors and fonts and brand aesthetics are. You can use these tools, but first you've got to identify what's off about it and then figure out where you want to go moving forward. And our third phase is all about marketing and content. Very, very important. And this might be the area where it's like really easy for you to actually identify because this is the stuff, again, that we're doing all the time as seasoned entrepreneurs. So the first thing to do is to do an audit of your website. Look at it as a strategist. Does this clearly communicate who I'm helping today or who I want to help? Does this clearly communicate my expertise? Does this sound like me today? Because chances are your voice, your confidence, your clarity on what you offer has changed so much over the years. And so doing a very simple audit, looking at it and saying what feels off, what feels disconnected can tell you, okay, yes, if this stuff is off, rewriting it's not necessarily going to fix the problem. I need to go solidify the foundation again so that I can write this with ease. And again, this is something else we added into You Branded because once you have done the foundational branding work, the customer and the messaging specifically, it's actually really easy to use AI tools to help you write your website copy. In the messaging framework that I teach, we also talk about your brand voice and establishing what that is. And so when you feed those 2 documents into ChatGPT with the correct prompt, you can get a whole homepage layout and your story written and all of those things updated to reflect where you are today. Another thing I want you to look at is your marketing strategy. Chances are you might feel really disconnected from your brand because you're doing things that you don't enjoy doing. And like, we're not going to love everything that we do as entrepreneurs, but where we show up, where we create our content is a big piece of the puzzle. It's something we always have to do. And so you want to make sure that where you're showing up and how you're showing up reflects how you want to run your business. Because I decided a long time ago that relying 100% on social media just didn't fit my personality and my lifestyle because I don't like being on my phone and I don't like engaging with other people all the time. I am more the type of person that wants to sit down and record a video and let that work for me for years to come using SEO. You got to find what's right for you. But if you're in your business, you've been in your business and you're like something just doesn't feel right anymore, maybe your marketing strategy isn't completely on brand. And this is why going through the branding process can help because you can go back to the foundations of how do you want to show up in the world? What is important to you? What are your values? What is your mission? Who do you want to serve? And that can help you choose the right marketing strategy. And the final thing I want you to audit is going to be your offers. And this honestly is usually where most people are like, yep, that's not right, that's off, because something you created years ago no longer reflects where you are today, and it happens. But it's really important when you are auditing your offers that you're taking a few things into consideration. One, does it work? Like, is it selling? Because if it's not selling, then obviously there's a lot of different things that we can look at. But if it's not selling and you don't necessarily love it, it's a lot easier to get rid of and create a new offer. Number two is if it is selling and it does work, but you no longer really like the process, then you can start to ask yourself, okay, what about the process don't I like? How can I tweak that? How can I modify that? Are there different things that I can do with my strategy to actually help with that? And then also, maybe the particular offer still works, but it's evolved in a sense. And so I'll give you an example. My membership, the Academy, it started off very, very niche in terms of helping entrepreneurs market off of social media. But it grew so much over the years. And I grew to the point where it really became just a business hub where, yes, that's the main thing that entrepreneurs want, is to learn how to market off of social media, but they also want a safe space to ask their questions and to get a strategy and coaching without the one-to-one price tag. So the program morphed and the messaging changed and the ideal customer changed. And that happens all the time. But before you go and just whip up a new sales page, you want to go back to the brand foundations to make sure that you're really clear on those fundamental pieces so that you don't find yourself in a position 3 months from now where you're like, well, I changed all that, but actually I don't like that either. And then you got to do it all again. The biggest takeaway that I had when I was going through a brand refresh is that taking the time, not like months, but like 2 weeks to really dedicate to the process pays off long term. Because in 2022, I decided that I didn't like my brand anymore. And I was going to update my website and I was going to update my offers. And I was surface level. I was like, oh, we'll just fix these small little things and that'll fix everything. And it didn't. It absolutely backfired. I spent so much time updating my website when I should have been selling, only to redo my website a year later. And that's what you see today. But I really needed to go back to the foundational level and just go through the process again. And when I did that, everything just clicked into place. And then when I updated my website again, it took me like a week, maybe. A week, and I did it myself. And before it was like months, because again, I was trying to update a website without being clear on my customer. And I tried to update my messaging on my website without being clear on my core brand messages. So there was always this, it was always like I was butting heads, if that makes sense. What I really recommend is if you've gone through this audit, you grab that checklist by going to brandmary.com/checklist and you realize that I need a brand refresh, and there's nothing wrong with that. It happens to all of us. And the faster that you listen to that call that you need a refresh, the better off you're going to be, because otherwise you're just going to keep fighting against something. It's not going to change. Go back to the foundational levels and ask yourself, who the F am I today? Who do I want to work with? What do I want to offer? What are my messages? How do I want people to feel? Where do I want to show up? And answer those questions. And I made it super easy for you to do that by creating You Branded. And You Branded is such an interesting program because it can help those who are just getting started. In fact, that's the main customer for the program, because I spent 8 months trying to figure out my brand, and absolutely no one needs to do that, because we need to get started marketing and selling. You're in a different position because you're already doing those things, but now behind the scenes, you need to refresh your brand. And so You Branded is going to help you do that in a short amount of time. It's going to give you all of the questions that you can answer and then prompts to feed that information and the prompts into ChatGPT so you can easily update your copy, update your content, update your brand pillars, update your story page, all of those different things just by going through and answering these questions. And so if you feel like you're ready to take that step, you're like, heck yes, I need a brand refresh, go to brandmary.com/youbranded and get signed up for You Branded and get started absolutely instantly. I really recommend that you prioritize the essential pieces, the pieces that are ultimately going to trickle into the money-making activities. Again, I've always found that that really is unique positioning, customer, and your messaging, because everything comes back to those core pieces. Again, I teach you how to do that and take away the mystery and the overcomplicated process of branding inside of You Branded. I simplify everything for you there, and I feel really confident that in just 2 weeks, you'll have your brand refresh ready to freaking rock and roll. One last thing I wanted to encourage you to do: invite your audience in. It can feel really easy when you already have a business to do all this behind the scenes and then be like, haha, I have a new brand, right? But we don't have to hide the fact that our businesses have changed. We don't have to hide the fact that our brands have evolved. And people, our audience, our community love to see that that is true. So as you go through this process and you modify your offers, you update a page, send an email to your list and say, I picked out new brand colors. I wanted to share my brand inspo with you. I'm excited to share how this translates to a website in a few days. Say, I'm getting new brand photos. What are some things that you think of when you think of my brand in terms of location? Help me out. Include your audience. Invite them into the process. It truly makes it, A, more fun, B, builds better community, and C, takes so much pressure off of you, because you don't have to have it perfect ever, ever, okay? And the more transparent and authentic we are with our audiences, the more they're going to ultimately trust us, and the more excited they're going to be to support you in this next phase of your process. All right. Well, that wraps up today's episode. If you are considering a brand refresh, go to brandmary.com/checklist. If you're already like, no, Michelle, I know I need a refresh, go to brandmary.com/youbranded to get signed up for You Branded and get started immediately. I promise you, you will thank me in 2 weeks when you send me a message and you say, oh my gosh, this was so easy. And I'm going to be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with this video, which shares a little bit more about how I navigated my brand refresh to help you along in your journey.